then what we also would like to do is that we're going to now sort of get a snapshot from 4 people who have been prepared in advance to come and tell you the right answers. To come and give their personal reflections on what the conference has meant for them, those 2 questions that we've all been just discussing with each other. But I asked them then also to think of a 3rd question, which was that wider, what have you noticed about how God might have been at work amongst us over the last 4 days? What have you seen that's the sort of the bigger picture? Because this can, we've been touched individually in many ways. But what might be the wider picture story that we might want to be hearing as we go away from this conference? And I've asked Hannah Cartwright, who's, I believe, our newest ordained person in the room, ordained in January. And I've asked for Graham Fancourt, if you would like to come up ready as well, Chris Bull and Sue Boys. And I'll let them, if they want to introduce themselves and say a bit more than their names, that's fine. And you have 3 to 4 minutes each.
So I'm Hannah Cartwright, and I'm Assistant Curate in Littlemore in the city of Oxford with Marguerite Armistead, who's out there somewhere as my TI. And as a new curate, this week has been a really great opportunity to meet with colleagues from across the diocese. Most of you I'm meeting for the first time. And also to catch something of the diocesan vision. And that's something that I'll be thinking about, how we can take that back into parish and what that's going to look like as it plays out. And I think something that stood out to me this week is just how valuable the various arts have been, both in enriching our worship, but also as an act of kind of expressing and exploring and living out our faith. And that's something that we do already explore in Littlemore, and something that I'd really like to go back and build on. It's something that I've seen play out here in a really visual, amazing way, and that I'd like to invest in there. And the theme of thankfulness, which Bishop Stephen spoke about in our work on Colossians. And in order to be thankful, we have to obviously stop long enough to take stock and to notice. And these few days away have really given me the opportunity to stop, notice, and reflect on all those things which I have to be thankful for, both in this very new ministry, to me at least, this very new ministry generally, but also in my parish specifically, just that little bit of time away with colleagues to look back and to go back into that with fresh eyes. And it's been especially lovely to hear what God is doing in communities around the diocese. But I've also had my attention refocused and retuned onto what he's doing in the wider church and indeed the wider world. And I was especially moved by the Archbishop's testimony of the challenges faced by persecuted Christians beyond our safe corner here in England. And Christ being so powerfully present among his persecuted church, and that extraordinary courage that it takes to live out your faith in that context. And a word that I've heard a number of people use, and something that I'd like to echo as well, is inspired. And that's definitely something that I'm going to take away with me, feeling inspired, feeling refreshed and ready to get stuck back into the nitty-gritty of ministry and daily life, but also inspired to do that with a bigger vision of what the kingdom of God looks like with the people I'm serving. Something I'm also taking away is that if we're wanting our communities to flourish in their Christian life, then we need to ensure that we are also resourced and supported and flourishing and modelling that healthy ministry that Archdeacon Olivia highlighted. And a big part of that learning for me, as I'm sure my incredibly patient TI will also agree, is finding the right balance with my various vocations, especially to ordained ministry and to family life. And I'd just like to say a huge thank you to everybody for welcoming not only me, but also James, who's possibly been the more vocal member of the family. And I think it says something really important about how we all integrate our various vocations, and especially to those of my generation who are exploring their calling, when the church shows that it really values whole people and supports them as much as you have all supported me in being here and juggling that this week. So even though I'm an introvert by nature and lots of people here, I'm going away feeling really, really refreshed and uplifted. I'm really hopeful about the shape of the church going forward, both on a kind of bigger scale, but also about what it means for the parish that I'm going back to. So thank you for having us this week.
Hi, my name's Graham Fancourt. I'm a priest in Reading. What's been a highlight for me, those of you who were here 4 years ago, we had a cracking conference here that was about celebrating what had been. We were celebrating, quite rightly, a bit of time where lots of things had happened, and it was a great kind of celebration of that. This time has been different because instead of looking backwards, we've been looking forwards. And I felt that's kind of been picked up in different places, and I've been quite excited and energized by that, having had a conference that celebrated all that's been, to then look forward with hope for what might be to come. One of the things that I'm involved in is our link with Nandyal Diocese in South India, and it's been amazing to have Abraham and Chandrasekhar here with us and with our other international partners as well. So another thing I've been hugely thankful for is the hospitality of this diocese. Watching our international friends make new connections, new friends over different meals and over coffee. And what a blessing that's been to watch that happen. So thank you for your hospitality from the Nandyal committee. On a bigger question, I think one of the things that's going to stick with me is the first Eucharist we had together, where Bishop Stephen reminded us the only thing that was worth measuring in Ezekiel's vision was the depth of the water. We've got so much anxiety in our church over numbers, haven't we? I know it in Reading. I know it's all over the Church of England. And it deforms who we are. It makes us forget what God has called us to, what Christ has made us to be. What I've heard these last few days in various different sessions is for us to attend to the inner life of ourselves and also of our churches, to measure the depth of the river, the depth of God's grace, to attend to our compassion so that it isn't deformed by anxiety, so that our anxiety decreases as we attend to being Christ-like, not because we're told to, but because we are so enamored with the presence of Christ in our midst, because we are taking the time to contemplate Christ's presence in word, in sacrament, in a cosmos that we've scarred by our own naive industry, and in the faces of those that you and I are called to serve, and maybe especially in the faces of those we don't understand, and in the faces of those who frustrate us. So I leave this place seeking to be less anxious about numbers and to spend my time attending to Christ's presence in his world and in his church. Cheers.
My name is Chris Bull. I'm vicar at Christ Church, Flackwell Heath, and also assist Guy Elsmore in the Buckinghamshire Archdeaconry. My personal highlight, learning to balance a peacock feather on my nose and improve my juggling. My personal lowlight, failing miserably as a zebra in a bizarre reenactment of The Lion King. Did I hear someone say what happens in conference stays in conference? Okay. I'm deeply grateful to Bishop Stephen for his rich and careful and very thoughtful unpacking of Colossians for us, and all the personal challenges of what it means to be Christ-like, but also the challenge for us to be a more Christ-like church for the sake of the world. for that rediscovery of praying the general thanksgiving. That's been a personal rediscovery and a joy. I think, like many others, I've not failed to be challenged and encouraged and blessed by the story of others, by the courage of Archbishop Angelos and the communities across the Middle East and North Africa. That challenge to be more resilient and to build resilience in those we have responsibility for. And also for Loretta Mingela's challenge to engage more compassionately. And I've taken that on board for myself too. I took to heart something at the very beginning of the conference, that challenge to think about the spaces in between. And that's one of the things that I think has been perhaps the greatest blessing, this conversation and community that we share with one another, especially that has been in our small groups. I went to Joanna Collicott's workshop on the contemplative God, and it opened up God's mindfulness of us, of me, but also that living mindfully for others. And I will take away, and perhaps as a diocese we should take away that sharing of our lives one with another in this common calling. In a large diocese, I think it's been that sharing of our lives and our common stories, that common calling to be Christ-like and to live Christ-like for the sake of our communities. There's been a rich blessing, and it will be, I hope and trust, for this diocese, a lasting blessing. Thank you.
I'm Sue Boyes. I'm a priest in the Dorchester Team Ministry, and because it's slightly relevant to something I want to end up by saying, I'll also tell you that I'm one of your proctors in convocation for General Synod. Personally, the experience of sitting in the Epiphany sound space and being prayed for is something that I haven't matched possibly in the whole of my life, let alone in the whole of this conference. And I just want to say thank you. They're not here, but to you who made that possible, and to God who gave me such a lot through that experience. My other high point was kind of as expected as that was unexpected, because I had the privilege of listening to Rachel in Kimberley at the Link conference. And for me, having this real concern that we all have for creation set out in an undergirding theology that we can take home with us and work with to underpin what we're doing has been a huge gift. So thank you, Rachel. And thank you, Bishop Stephen, for inviting her. Perhaps a really, I'm going to say an odd thing now. I shall have been married for 40 years this year, and that means that my journey with this diocese is 40 years long. And I started off feeling quite old in this conference, I must admit. But that has brought, as the few days has gone on, a real joy. This has always been a very diverse diocese. On the Oxford Ministry course on which I trained, that was a real joy and felt like a really good preparation for ministry. In more recent years, being a diocese that was recognised as being very diverse, and I'll be honest, in some quarters recognised as a problem because of its diversity, has been quite a sadness for me at a personal and, I think, an institutional level. And so the thing that I want to say, which is really hopeful, is that in our praying together, in our laughing together, in the opportunities we've had to pray that have been scheduled, and in those that have happened because people have been talking and have prayed together, and in listening together, I have had a real sense of new community in this diocese over these 2 or 3 days. We've got a brand for new community. We think of it as housing estates and how we might do mission on it. But can I leave with you the suggestion that this conference is the beginning of a new community of priests in this diocese and in our partner diocese, called to leadership. And I want to sort of end as I began, with words that some of you will be familiar. For all that has been, thanks. To all that will be, yes.
Thank you, everyone. That's amazing and very humbling to listen to that. Thank you very much. And we'll go away with those many words. I'd like to invite Rachel to come back. It's been a delight to have you with us, Rachel, the last 4 days as you've journeyed with us on this conference. And we look forward to your final words with us.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me to be here. And I truly am leaving this place feeling also refreshed. And I think the one thing that struck me is the fact that our drought and our pain in Cape Town can actually lead to healing and to hope in other parts of the world. And that's been a deep, profound thing for me. I was asked to reflect on over the last few days, and I've been trying to sort of listen and to hear and to reflect on what I have learned through being here. I think the first thing that struck me is the unity and diversity. My diocese, Cape Town, is also very diverse in terms of our church personship. We have very crazy lows and very hazy highs also. And we don't do it very well. And I have been very inspired by the worship and the inclusivity of different streams of worship that have led to a depth of entering into this theme. And particularly the willingness to embrace and dedicate resources to the arts. And it takes resources to dedicate to them. With the amazing range of workshops, and people have spoken about the power of prayer ministry through music, which I've never even heard of before. And who would have thought that you would have somebody doing a PhD in installation art and liturgy? Very, very rich. And then I've heard stories of Mossy Church, which is messy church in the mud, and and Muddy Church. You do rain very well here. We've had Hillsong, we've had Birds Agnus Dei. We sang in Latin and we sang in Setswana. We drank from the deep wells of the past and we embraced the bubbling new streams. And that reflects the contemplation at the heart of this diocese. In terms of compassion, throughout Southern Africa, many dioceses have links, and often they are very superficial. The bishop goes and a couple of people go. But here, I believe that the linked dioceses are becoming and have become part of the DNA of the diocese. I visited a very tiny church on Sunday, which prays faithfully for K&K. The church knew how to make a South African flag. They didn't get it upside down, which is amazing. They give a percentage of their income to K&K. I found that very profound. Bishop Ozzy is part of this family. And in 3 weeks' time, Catherine and Vusi get married. But what does that mean? Loretta said, compassion is not a number. Compassion is a face. And because of these international links, for you, compassion is people, compassion is friends, compassion is not a stranger on the other side of the world. And I was also struck that you in Oxford are part of a global family, through the students, through the student ministry, through the Oxford Centre for Climate Change, the John Ray Institute. There's that global perspective that this diocese has for compassion, which is quite unique. And turning to courage, I have been very struck by your courageous bishop. The Church of England is part of the conservative bit of this society, and yet he had the vision to take on fresh expressions And that must have been really hard, like thinking back. A courage to say, yes, we love and are deeply rooted in our traditions, which has come through from Bishop Steve, but that we need to hear what God is saying. One of our bishops once said, I tell my priests, I want you to try new things, and if you fail, you have my back. And I think that's very profound. And I think that's what encourage means. It means to put courage into somebody else to take risks. And I believe that you have been gifted with a bishop who will do that. He will put courage into you to try new things. And if you mess up, the bishop has got my back. I hope. So what have I heard the Spirit saying? I felt 2 goosebump moments. The one was during the first talk from Bishop Stephen with the Colossians, when he wove the theme of redemption into all creation. And that was very, very profound. And at that point I thought, well, I don't actually need to be here because the message has been said. And he reminded us that those verses in Colossians are coming from a very ancient text. And that encourages us to go back to the roots and the depths of our faith. And the second moment was when Loretta talked about Hurricane Haiyan in the Philippines. I had used the slide of how the water heats up and how that speeded up, it charged the hurricane. And I almost took that slide out because I said, well, that's meaningful for me, but it's now quite a few years ago. Maybe I shouldn't put it in, and I did. And I put it in because just like Loretta, the experience of the Philippine hurricane for me was a turning point when I heard Bishop Jonathan Casimina explain the impact on his diocese and his community of that hurricane. And like him and like Loretta, I want to ask you to act fast. We cannot act slowly, because every year that we wait without acting, climate change is getting worse. I have this picture of the Titanic. We have seen the iceberg. We're going to hit it. How badly we hit it, whether we scrape it or whether we have serious impact, depends on us and how fast we can turn the Titanic in the next 5 years. And I want to plead with you as my brothers and sisters here in Oxford, linked with our brothers and sisters in Southern Africa and in South India. Please put this high on your agenda. Changing your electricity sources, pushing with your politicians, whatever you need to do. Bring it high onto your agendas. We need it. The world is in crisis. While the agricultural revolution took centuries and the industrial revolution took generations, this ecological revolution has to happen within a matter of few years. It is no longer enough for us as Christians to feed the poor. We have to stop the poor from starving. I want to share with you a quote from Richard Rohr. Now, in our time, 3 rivers anguish for our world. Scientific breakthroughs, ancestral teachings flow together. From the confluence of these rivers we drink. We awaken to what we once knew. We are alive in a living earth. Despite our conditioning by the industrial society of the last 2 centuries, we want to name once again this world as holy. The anguish is growing. I believe that the blue planet has been a gift to the world of raising the anguish of the plastic in the ocean and the realities of environmental degradation. You are gifted with science. You are gifted with a bishop who cares about science. But science needs ethics. If we think about the scientists and those who have a PhD is a doctor of philosophy, and philosophy is supposed to include ethics and the impact on the environment and the impact on human beings. But what has happened to science is with the rise of petrochemicals, engineers suddenly needed much more training. The petrochemical industries needed many more engineers. And they said Yale and Harvard and Oxford, those kind of universities, they focus too much on the social sciences. They're spending too much time on ethics. And therefore, they set up institutions such as MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, to focus on technology without the ethics, without the social sciences, without the implications for the communities infected and the communities of the earth. So science needs ethics. Science needs morals. Now, through my experience of the Diocese of Oxford in these last few days, those three streams are present. Deep streams. The study and the recognition and the love of early spirituality, the potential to study further the spiritualities of the early church, a love and an acceptance of fresh expressions, of different ways of trying to explore creation spirituality, your awareness of the challenges of the global community, and courageous leadership. And I believe that God is calling this diocese to be prophetic. You have the resources of an amazing wealth of gifted people. You are already taking the lead with your resolution on the divestment of fossil fuels. You can take the lead in terms of liturgical renewal, environmental actions, speaking truth to power. I believe that God is laying a special call on this diocese to take the lead to spearhead this new reformation that seeks to renew the face of the earth. So may streams of living water flow through you for the healing of the nations and for the blessing of the earth. I would like to end with a Franciscan prayer that we can say together. May God bless us with discomfort at easy answers, half-truths, and superficial relationships, so that we may live deep within our hearts. May God bless us with anger at injustice, oppression, and exploitation of people, so that we may work for justice, freedom, and peace. May God bless us with tears to shed for those who suffer from pain, rejection, hunger, and war, so that we may reach out our hands to comfort them and turn their pain into joy. And may God bless us with enough foolishness to believe that we can make a difference in this world, so that we can do what others claim cannot be done, to bring justice and kindness to all our children and the poor. Amen.
Thank you, Rachel. We're going to be preparing now for our final Eucharist. We've probably got about maximum of 10 minutes, but 5 minutes. Can I ask, clearly some of you will want to get up, stretch your legs, you may need to go outside, but can we perhaps try to hold some space and some silence as best as we can in the preparations and busyness, just as we come to this final Eucharist? So if you need a conversation, perhaps you'd like to go outside, perhaps we might remain as still as we can in this room as we prepare. Thank you.